Today's episode is brought to you by Archon Mounts. For those of you that are content creators and you want the best mounting solutions for your cell phones, your DSLR cameras, well, go to archon.com. Be sure to use my promo code Hawaii and you'll get 20% off your entire order. Also, all of their products come with a lifetime guarantee. So head on over to archon.com, keeping your devices within reach. So, family, we are live, YouTube, Twitch, Kick, and Rumble, also X, and eventually Spotify and Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, and whatever podcast outlets that are out there. And today's going to be a little bit different. We're going to try something new. Part of it is there are some life events that happened where we lost a few people. And one of the things I want to do is honor people that have come and gone, people that have graduated and went to the next level in life. And if you see me on social media, one of our fellow content creators by the name of Joshua Busby passed away at the age of 43. And we're going to honor him a little bit. We did one the other day. And today we're going to talk about the sanctity of life and how important it is to do things not just with excellence, but do things well. It is kind of late here, but this is something that God put in my heart. And as soon as we got home, we did some shopping, ate dinner, and I just started making some notes, wrote these things out, and we're going to go through them. And I hope that you guys enjoy it. For those of you brand new, you're watching Glow Sessions. We are live right now, and we will be back in 43 seconds. Today's title is The Sanctity of Life. I got a list of names. That was probably the most calm intro I've done in a very long time. Most of them have a beat or some rock anthems. But today, I'll play some peaceful piano. And that song was by, I wrote his name up. But if you're on YouTube, there's credit for it. You want to download his music, it's on there as well. So I also put that on YouTube so I don't get hit with copyright. So the sanctity of life. And what is it? I Googled the meaning. I kind of know, right? We all know what sanctity and it's holy, right? That's one way of like the preciousness of life or the holy part. Like what is it? And I can't do today's podcast without bringing scripture, obviously, or dropping something that's of relevance and. Jesus says that I'm the way, the truth, and the life. That everything filters through him, right? And when we look at everything that we do in life, we've had so many family members, and just I made a list. I'm going to read through them. I'm going to get to it in just a second, and I'm going to tell some stories. So what's going to happen today is that we're going to hang out, talk story for a minute. I'm going to tell some stories. And then I want to cover some things that what I believe what God put in my heart is that what is really important. What do we do now, right? That's the question, right? So what do we do now? And for those of you that are on X, on Twitter, a lot of you that follow this gentleman by the name of Joshua Busby, he passed away at the age of 43. And I did a podcast with him when he was just newly 43. He recently just turned 43, and we spent about 3.5 hours doing doing a podcast. But anybody that I do a podcast with, a lot of times, we'll spend a good, sometimes half an hour before, sometimes an hour, depends on who it is. Just kind of obviously going through what it's going to look like. We do the workflow, what the audio is going to sound like, what the video, the lighting, as much as we can, right, within reason. And then we talk a little bit about just icebreakers, like things to kind of get us both comfortable, because you don't know what you're going to get with a guest. Unless they're your friend. If they're your friend, like you've been longtime friends, that's easy. But it's kind of cheating, I think, in a way to do it. But those are actually really good to do podcasts like that as well. And anyway, so Joshua, even after we were done with our live, so just from pre to live, and then we actually talked a good almost an hour after that. So that day we spent at least 5 hours together. That's for the live and the talking. And then, I won't share. There's a lot of things that we talked about where our dreams and goals and things that we wanted to do together. You guys know me. I'm a hustler. So I've always got something that I think would be a good idea. So, and we actually ended up doing something together after that. We did it was a course, like a webinar where we offered our own courses. He had his, video product and how he believed that video is the next wave of social media, which obviously I believe that as well. And he was very, very passionate about that. And of course, mine was more of the live video product. I love video, period. So we actually did it. And I think that was free. So we did that for free, where we offered the webinar, and then part of us doing that together is that we did a promoting of ourselves, and it was more so for him. I really wanted to bless him, and one of the things we talked about is future revenue, right? So what does that look like, and after that, I kind of had an idea. Right, we kind of had an idea that, well, we talked about it. Actually, we did talk about it, that we're not promised tomorrow, and so we did cover that. Like, what happens if you pass away, or like, what are the next steps? And I think one of the most beautiful things you could ever do for someone, other than invest in them, is spending time. Like. And he invested time in me. And so going to land the plane on this whole sanctity of life and how important it is to treasure that. Just from that one day, we spent, a good 5 hours, but then there's other times where we spend more time in discussions, and whether it's, texting, or it could be on I have two phones, right? So, and they're both Hawaii numbers. They're both, they got an 808 area code, and for some reason, I don't know why I called him from. So I have an iPhone, which I typically use that for more business and social media stuff. So I call him from that one, not thinking that I don't really check that phone a lot, like on a personal level. So anyways, I call him, and it's like it was just interesting because he picks up right away. And I think Christine and his wife would help him with that. And so from that start of that conversation with a phone that I typically would use for business, it became very personal. And every once in a while, I would, call, because I don't know, I like having a real conversation. The texting and the DMs are okay. But I like being able to say, "Hey, man, I was just thinking about you. I just want you to know that." And that was nice. And I'll share this one. I don't know. I honestly can't remember, because my wife has such a big family. But we were talking today. I forgot what we were doing. We just kind of woke up, and she said, my wife has these gasping moments. I'm not sure if you ever had these gasping moments. My wife has these gasping moments where it kind of makes me like, what happened? Like, what happened? And she didn't respond. So, as a husband, as a father, immediately I'm like, honey, you got to tell me what happened. And she wasn't responding. And of course, we kind of had a little disagreement about that. And, me, I get bothered, right, when I feel like there's something wrong and I can't assist or be helpful in that. And when we finally talked about it, one of her loved ones passed away. Her it's kind of like a brother to her, and I'll read his name, Bradley Beauchamp. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell some stories, but what I want to do is read some names off, and whatever I can share about them, I'll share. So like I said, today's going to be different. I'm going to read some names, honor them, whatever time I think I can devote to that name, I'm going to honor them. And there's something we did a few years ago on this platform. Well, I can't say this platform because we're live on, I think, 7 different platforms right now. On X, on Twitter at the time. And we did a global live stream event where I can't remember how many were in this one, but we've done some where there are like 30 to 40, maybe 50 different content creators. And we would all go live like that same day, but we would go live consecutively. Like we would all go one. So kind of like, hey, I'm done. Okay, now it's so-and-so's turn. Be sure to follow this person. This particular one, I honestly can't remember the theme of it, but I know what day it was. It was, when Pearl Harbor. It was during the bombing of Pearl Harbor, that date, December 7th. And so I was at the USS No. Actually, I did two. Punch Bowl. So the one I remember is right. I was at Punch Bowl. And so the Punch Bowl Cemetery is a veteran cemetery. And they have these halls. Similar to like the one in the Vietnam one that they have on the East Coast. I think East Coast. But this one has like a bunch of halls that are made by these tall marble stone statues. Not statues, but anyways, they're like corridors. And then there's also another building. And I decided I'm going to read these names. I just want to read them. And as I started to read them, there was a heaviness that came upon me, like not so much that I don't know how to explain it. I started to read the names, and then I started to say them out loud, and that's where it got heavy. I started to say their names out loud. I was live. Eventually, there were thousands of people that watched this live, and I was saying these names, and I was reading their names. I was reading out their rank, their family members, I believe, on this wall as well. So, and civilian. It wasn't just military, because there are people that were civilians as well that were killed. I think it was over 2,000 people that were total that were killed. And as I started to read the names, I remember how much I was weeping and I couldn't stop. I could not stop weeping. And I remember how hard it was for me to finish reading. And I think I had to take a break because I couldn't say the names without, like, I wasn't heaving, but it's like that shuddering, it's like, and it felt good to say those names, to honor those people. And it felt amazing. So what I'm going to do now, it's going to be a little bit different. Like I said, it's going to be different. I'm going to read some names. I'm going to honor them. And there's no order. There's no specific order. But I'm going to tell as much stories as I can about each one. I'm going to play some fancy music. I gave the credit on my YouTube channel so people want to know who it is. But let me go ahead and start this off. Joseph Hui. As a matter of fact, I'm going to read both him and the wife, who's just so happened to be my grandmother. Joseph Hui and Alice Hui. Joseph Hui was my grandpa. He was as Hawaiian as they get. He was, I'll tell you a story about him. I used to see him iron his money on this wooden desk. And I always ask him, Grandpa, why are you ironing your money? Why are you doing that? And he says, I like my money crispy. And I found that so funny. As a kid, like, that's so weird, Grandpa. Why would you do that? But you know what? Every time he gave me money, I appreciated it because it was crispy. I loved it. But he also had a Bible on his desk. I remember that. He always had a Bible. It was always open. And it wasn't one of those pretty leather ones. It was pretty beat up. There were pencil marks everywhere. Pages are wrinkled. And it was because of him that part of who he was is the reason why I am who I am today. And of course, my grandma, Alice Hui, I'll tell a quick story about her. She, every morning, 4 o'clock every morning, she'd be up from 4 to 6, 4 to 8, just praying. That was my grandma. And of course, for those of you that don't know, she had 7 kids. You know, so she had a lot of kids. So she had a lot to pray for. You know. Damian Lopez. That's my name, number 3. I've already talked about him before, but Damian Lopez. My grandfather. Well-known businessman. Gangster turned sold out for Jesus before he passed away. Daniel Angel Rodriguez, the mighty man that I never met. But my kids carry his DNA. Daniel Angel Rodriguez was a former military, United States Army. He was also a welder in Pearl Harbor. He was a man of his word, from what my wife tells me. And he passed away a year before I met my wife. I wish I could have met him. I think we'd have a lot of fun together. I really believe that. Yeah. Ulu Lonnie Fong, my sister-in-law, she passed away of cancer. I've shared her a few times in my social media. She was a teacher, taught Native Hawaiian. She's a mother, grandmother. She wasn't really a sister to my wife in the early years. I think she was more of like a motherly type figure. And I think later on the sister part came in as my wife got older. But I will say that she was very precious, and my wife misses her dearly. Adrian Ewan. Can't say enough about that guy. He was a pastor, teacher, psychologist. Did I say principal? Principal teacher. I want to say he pastored well over 200, 300 churches. Supervised, or was what's the word? He was an overseer of that many churches. He planted many churches. I think he had 5 PhDs when he passed away. I've done a podcast with his daughter, my cousin, Dr. Terry Lynn Kim. It's funny how the doctor carries on. Janine Rodriguez, Melanie Rodriguez, my wife's family. Troy Rodriguez, my nephew, he left a little bit earlier than he should have. That was sad. That was something that just, I think, was too early. He passed away tragically in a motorcycle accident, and the lasting effects are, I mean, just even to this day. My wife knows the dates of when took his last breath. You know, my wife is good about stuff like that. She remembers certain dates like that. I don't quite remember all those dates the way she does. But Troy's girlfriend, Morgan Morkowski, she was a passenger on the motorcycle, and they both of their lives, I think. I know he died on scene, and she, I think, they pronounced her deceased at the hospital, I believe. And they were both under 23. Way too soon. Yeah. My uncle Chuck Murray, old school Hawaiian. Brother man, basically, he'd been through some tough stuff in his life. And I don't know if anybody really knows all of the details. You know, people at that age, it's hard to tell. When I met him, you could tell he's going through some struggles, even in his old age. I think when he finally passed, I think it was, in one way, a release of all the struggle he's been through. Henry Kealaiki, Frank Sean, Danny Lopez. That's my grandfather's brother, my uncle. Uncle Grandpa. I don't know what you would call that. Not sure what you would call that. Florence Perelius. That's my one of my favorite aunties. She ended up passing away without children. And never quite figured out why. I'm gonna... Oh, okay. Sorry. Had a little hiccup. Sorry about that. Where was I? Yeah, so Florence, I don't know why she didn't have kids. I really don't know why. Never did understand that. Yvonne Kealoha Lopez. That's my mom. I will say this. She had about 1,000 people at her funeral. Which I found interesting. In Hawaii, it's hard to not attend a funeral just because we all live in an island. So it's almost like you have no excuse. It's like you have no excuse to not attend a funeral. So, well, my mom, she was a retired teacher, former pastor, business owner, investor. She was in the medical industry as well. She managed a medical group. But her biggest, I don't want to say accomplishment, but let's just say accomplishment was when she was a pastor, when she was a teacher. She was able to influence more people there. And the 20 years that she did it, more than the rest of her, like 47 other years of her life. And I did the math. I can't remember what it was, but I want to say it's at least 20,000 people that she was able to influence, whether it's through teaching or pastoring, because of her long tenure of teaching and pastoring. So there's a lot of people at her funeral. Just it was so much that, you know, they had to, everybody, there was people outside, like there just wasn't enough room. Milton Yamasaki, that's my uncle Milton. Farmer, researcher for the University of Hawaii. Great father, uncle, grandfather, husband. I always looked at him as like he was like the Yakuza. That's how I always see it. He was one of those guys. I never really understood him until I got older. As I got older, then I started to understand, oh, this guy is, he's pretty legit. He's up there. He developed a few patents in terms of agriculture and in research. I don't know I don't think they were under him, but through the University of Hawaii, they were able to patent some things, some of the research, and all the research was connected to agriculture, gardening, those kind of things. But as a kid, I remember, man, he used to love smoking. He used to love his cigarettes. It was the what was it? It was the brown ones, the brown, long, skinny cigarettes. I don't want to say. I want to say Virginia Slims, but I don't know if that was. And I think he just did it because my Auntie Harriet, that was her cigarettes. And I just. Tilly Sevilla. That's my grandma Tilly. That's a long, long story. I don't know if I have time to tell it, but I'll say this. She comes into my dad's life when my dad is already, older. My dad was like, I want to say in his 60s already. She comes to our church and she says, oh, by the way, and I'm oversimplifying. She goes, oh, by the way, I'm your grandmother. I'm like, what? Like, who are you? After, spending time eating lunch, we find out that there's a lot of hidden parts to my dad's life that were kept from him, probably for good reason. Even though, my grandma Tilly felt differently about the situation, but my grandfather, Grandpa Lopez, Damien, who I talked about earlier, he loved my dad. And whether he was biological or not biological, for my dad, the grandfather, one thing we do know for sure is that he was my grandfather. And he raised me as a grandfather. So, but I think by her coming and delivering that to my dad at that stage of life, I think it was important for her and also for my dad, to get some closure. To my dad, everything she said didn't really matter in the sense of the truth, but what mattered was that he was able to meet his biological mom. And I thought that was cool. Because up to that point, he never met her. And I thought that was pretty cool. I'm going to run through some names. I'm not going to spend time on them unless I feel led to. Philip Ellsworth. Mona Parker. Jerry and Richard Tavares. I'll talk about Jerry and Richard. Jerry and Richard Tavares were an old couple that came to our church when I was younger. Portuguese couple. So if you're from Hawaii or you know anything about Hawaii, you know that Portuguese people are very important. They are extremely important to the culture of Hawaii. And Richard and Jerry Tavares are no exception. Straight up 100%, as we say in Hawaii, Portuguese. Richard was a hard-working carpenter his whole life. Built stuff. He worked with his hands, and he let you know it too. He let you know that he worked with his hands, because every time you shake your hand, you better put on your steel grip, because if not, he's going to squeeze the life out of your hands. And he was doing that in his 70s. And he'd look at you, he's smiling, he's like, I got you. And to Jerry Tavares, she was just, man, a beautiful singer. Beautiful voice. And she sang loud. She knew how to project. Alan and Albert Souza. They are the nephews of people I just mentioned. Both of them great mechanics. And they were brothers. Albert was probably a better mechanic. Alan was he became a friend of mine. And I'll tell you this story. Is one time I went to his house, and I knew he's kind of been in and out of jail. He had a rough life, and I said, "Hey, Alan, can I use your bathroom?" Yeah. He goes, "Are you gonna do number one or number two?" I'm like, "Number one." He goes, "Okay. Well, make sure you sit down." I'm like, "Wait, what?" I said, "What if I did number two?" He goes, "You would sit down." So I'm like, "So why did you ask?" And he was like, "I just wanted to know. I need to make sure." I said, "Okay. All right, I'll sit down." I later find out that that's his thing. Because he spent so much time in prison, because the toilet is right next to the bed, so they had this agreement. Everybody sits down. And from that moment, I said, okay, this guy is special. He fixed all my cars. My dad's cars, our cars, he fixed them all. Here's the funny thing about Alan. He would fix the cars, but he was highly OCD, extremely bad about it. Like, it was a legit problem. I don't know if it came about through drug addiction or what, but man, he would clean. He not only did he fix your car, but he would clean it up too. He'd wash it. He'd detail it. He had this one quirk and feature about him, though, is that if he had your paperwork that was your trash, he would shove it all somewhere in a bag and he'd put it somewhere in the car. Because I had this one truck that he fixed, he shoved everything in a glove box. So all of my trash was in the glove box. He didn't want to touch it. He's like, okay, you deal with it. I'll put it in a glove box. So all my trash and papers, all that stuff was in a glove box. That was Alan Souza. He ended up getting married in his last season and chapter of his life. And I'll say God blessed him. Through all of the things he's been through, God bless him at the last chapter of his life. And it was good to see that. Uncle Warren Pereira, he's our friend Leia's dad. He passed away, I think, too soon. He was I'll talk about him. He was one of those guys that worked with his hands. He worked hard. And when my wife and I first started pastoring in Kailua, Hawaii. If anybody knows anything about Kailua, Hawaii, Kailua is the place where Obama would vacation every year. I think he still does. Well, technically not Kailua, but anyways, that's where her dad was from. He lived in Kailua, and that's where we started pastoring. And I remember he would come, and I felt like he was one of those guys. He'd be in the back watching to see if I was real, if my wife and I were legitimately like honest and real people, not just someone taking a position to pastor a church to for whatever reasons. And one of the things he said was, never trust a pastor who doesn't want to work. And I never really understood that until I seen him work. He was a giver. He had no problems about giving, whether it's financially or time, resources, products, whatever. But he always worked. And fortunately, I had a job. So, you know, even though you're pastoring, even though that was a 40 hours a week more, actually, job, I had a job at the same time, which was, you know, when we opened up the drug and alcohol rehab on the same property. So that was 40 hours a week as well. So, you know, technically I'm 40 on and 40 kind of on call all the time, plus whatever. And I'm glad that I had that, because he was one of those guys that, like he said, don't ever trust a pastor who's afraid to work or not willing to work. So That's Uncle Warren. Who should I talk about? And I'll read a few more. Well, Joshua Busby, we talked about him. I think I'll land the plane on Jessica Kali'i Holokai. We actually flew to Hawaii. Oh, it's 2 years now, almost 2 years. One of our dear friends, she passed away. As a matter of fact, wow, this is crazy. So we saw her. We prayed for her. Then came out to Oregon. And then she passed away while then we flew back to, they asked us to do the funeral, and there were several, we weren't the only ones, but they asked us to do the funeral. And I would say my wife did such an amazing job of honoring Jessica. But she was really young. She was way too young. I think there's a lot more time left on her clock, but for whatever reason, I don't know. I don't know why she. That was hard because her daughter was set to graduate that year, and she was going to miss that. And that was tough. It's tough on Joe, her husband. But you know what's crazy? Is that even in her suffering, because she passed away of cancer, but even in the suffering, she was worshiping the Lord. I found it to be so amazing, so crazy. Kind of reminds me of my grandma. My grandma, she'd be in pain, and she'd just be singing, worshiping this old songs, There is power, wonder working power in the blood. She wouldn't even, sometimes she'd get the words wrong, or not wrong, but she'd mix them up. But man, she'd be singing from her heart, So here's where I'll land on this, and I'll turn the music down. Here's where I'll land on this, is that there have been many people that have come and gone. And we just don't know why. And one thing God put in my heart before I clicked the go live button today was that to be very intentional on steering this boat, just steering it to a place where it's not about just the people, right? There's a funeral that I was asked to do for one of our family members. And if you know anything about Hawaii, you have no excuse. You can't say, "Oh, I can't make it because it's too far." You can't say that in Hawaii. So, growing up in Hawaii, you're gonna go to at least five funerals a year. If all of your family lives in Hawaii, all of your friends, you're gonna go at least 5. If not go to, you're gonna know that you should have been at 5 funerals, because not just that everybody knows everybody, but everybody is either related, connected to, same school, same college, whatever. Well, anyways, we've been to funerals, and I don't mean any disrespect, but because that's not between me, it's not up to me to decide. But sometimes you just don't know the life story of the person that you're gonna honor. It could be anybody. It could be a loved one. Could be. And so one of the things I struggle with in doing this funeral is God, I don't know this person. I mean, I know that they're my wife's family, but I don't know all the details. And I'm literally searching through scripture, and how can I bless the family and honor their loved one, and because I didn't have a relationship with them. And I can imagine a lot of pastors that do funerals where it's a similar situation. And one thing God reminded me was, it's not about him or her or them or the families. It's not about them. It's about me. And I'm like, That's exactly what that's exactly what I need to hear, because I don't know. John 10:10 says that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, right? And Jesus says, I have come to give you life, and to give you life in abundance, to have it abundantly. And so everyone that hears this, or you're going to know that, man, there's some tough stuff, there's some hardships going on. But there's someone here that's willing to give you that freedom to have your life now in abundance. And I did a podcast with Soup the Chemist, Chris Cooper, last week. We talked about, one of the questions I asked him, we talked about, because he's putting out his audiobook. It should be out on April 4th, I believe. But we talked about the struggles of recording. He's a rapper, he's a writer, he's been around, he's like literally who is he? He's like the founding father of holy hip hop. And so anyways, we talked about his early years, and then now in his later years of life. Well, not later, but his second chapter. He's only like 10 years older than me. And we talked about the struggles of, recording, because he's doing all the audio for his audiobook, and it's great, by the way. I listened to 3 chapters, and it's great. And the thing we talked about was, because we both talked about, we can't stand hearing our voice. Like, we just can't. I don't like hearing it after I'm live. And we both agreed that there's a certain comfort when you hear yourself right now, right? And that he said, this is the hardest thing he's ever done. I said, well, is a struggle that, you dealing with perfection, wanting it to be the best, or do you think that maybe sometimes the enemy just puts things in your path that just, are trying to hinder you? And then he brought up a good point. He said that, I want to blame it on the devil, but a lot of times it's not even him. It's like there are things that we can do better, that we can do things with excellence that will alleviate some of those hardships. And what he talked about was some of the technology things that he was not open to. So rather than learn about just technology, how to get better at recording and saving audio, and he went the cheaper route and thought it'd be okay. Well, in that case, that actually caused him a little bit of heartache, having to hire somebody to fix some corrupted files, And so anyways, he says, in that case, I would like to blame the devil, but I can't, because it was me. And I said, sometimes we want to blame, but it's us, And I think sometimes the devil is like, hey, you're doing fine all by yourself. You know what I'm saying? So, let me just address, Sev, thank you. See you, brother. I meant to check my comments earlier. Sev is a friend of mine on social media. He's actually predominantly on X, I believe. But thank you for being here, brother. Appreciate you. So the enemy's here to steal, kill, and destroy, but Jesus comes to give us life and life in abundance. John 10:10. What does it actually look like? Right? What are we going to do with that? And earlier, for those that came in a little bit later, listening late, there are people that have lived their lives, what I believe, to the fullest, even though the life seems to be short. Like my mom passed away at 67. Joshua Busby passed away at 43. My nephew at 23. That one is a tough one. I don't know what. I don't understand that. I don't know. 23 years old. That's tough. At 23, how do you explain that? How do you that I don't know. But I do believe that for us that are here, one of the best ways to honor them is to not just keep pushing forward, but to do things well, to do things better. The great Tommy Lee, not the drummer, our friend Tommy Lee in Hawaii. He's one of our mentors in business. We met him in 2005. One of the things he said was, the day that you choose to stop growing, and that means educating yourself, aligning with mentors in business, in ministry, finance, learning a new skill, that the day that you choose to stop growing is the day that you begin to die. And that's such a tough thing to say, especially if you're not improving or growing in some form or fashion. Share a story. So my kids, they get the we have a few drum sets, okay, but they're kind of Frankenstein. So one of my son, my oldest son, and my youngest daughter, they grabbed part of the drum set out of the garage, brought it in the house, cleaned it up, and I told them we're going to practice. So we started practicing. My daughter's playing bass, and they're great, by the way. Okay, they're actually really good. But because of my nature, and I gotta remember that they're kids, and they're my kids, but they could be doing anything. They could be doing other things. So, but they're here playing with dad. So we're going over a few songs. This is Amazing Grace, Phil Wickham. Your Love Never Fails, Jesus Culture. And we're just practicing. We're doing the intros. We're doing the dynamics. We're working on bass drum work. We're snare, the bass. One of the songs. The dynamics of it are very. It's different in the area. Like I'll say this. So one of the songs, she needs to use a pick for the bass, and growing up, I didn't understand people using picks, but in this song, so anyways, as we're practicing, I don't think I got short. I know I didn't get short temper, but I got short patience a little bit. Not because I didn't like what I heard, but I know that they can do better, right? And then I had to pause and say, hey, if I'm being too hard, guys, am I being too hard? And it's no. And then my son was like, no, not really. Okay, he said not really. So that means I am. So I eased up, but I encouraged him. I said, you know what? That's it right there. That good job, right? But the fact is, they're learning how to play different types of music. And I said, because we're going to lead worship on Sunday, okay? And it's been a while since I've led. I mean, I've led on a Wednesday, but so this is what I told them. I said, it doesn't matter how good you are, if you know we're not leading songs, we're not singing songs, it doesn't matter what the congregation or your concern is. You should know the song, you should know what it was about. But when we're there to lead people into a place of worship and to honor the Lord. And so that's what we're there for. And so once we got into that comfort, making the mistakes wasn't that big of a deal. Now we're still gonna practice, make sure we do it to the best of our ability, right? So that being said, those things that we did today, number one, it blessed me. And number two, and all the names I mentioned earlier, like my grandfather, my grandmother, both of my grandparents actually, um, my mom, Uncle Age, all the people that had, sold into my kids, that had invested into my children. I know that they're rejoicing. I know that they are part of that cloud of witnesses. Right? Therefore, since there are a cloud of witnesses, they're surrounding. Right? Part of that scripture says that so that we may run the race. Right? And it's just, I don't know, it reminds me. So when I have my kids and we're practicing, and even though our drum set is kind of rinky dinky, if we got duct tape, we have duct tape on the bass drum head. And so we actually went to look at some kits today, or just equipment and things. Not quite ready. We don't need to replace the head because the duct tape is just fine. A-team, MacGyver action. But it reminded me today that those little investments, not just into our kids, but into our family, and like, hey, this is important, right? This is important that we do these things. And I will encourage anybody that has kids, not just spending time with them, but teaching them, taking the time to actually teach them, right? I'll share another story, and it's about Joshua. I talked a little bit about him in the beginning, but Joshua Busby, for those that don't know, he was someone that was an influencer on Twitter, on X, and it was just special. He was in a wheelchair. I would say most of his body was paralyzed. I know he could use his hand. He could move a little bit, from what I remember our conversation. We did a podcast together, and his wife was his caregiver, and they had all these tools and things to help him. But one thing I remember, he told me was sometimes he will get short. I think that's what he said, when he wants something a certain way, and when he told me that, we were live, right? He told me that, I'm thinking, like, who do you get mad at? And he said, sometimes I get, I have, he says, my temper. And he says in his earlier years, he had a temper. And then when he passed away, I remember that day and the following day and the day after, people were just pouring out their stories and how he invested in them, and how much of an impact he had on their lives. Now, mind you, Josh was wheelchair bound, can't walk. He had a breathing apparatus where it would put air to where it helped him open up and take a breath. He could breathe because so the machine, he put his mouth on it, it would blow air down to help him open up, and he would take a breath. And whenever they went out, it was battery powered. So I say all that even in his inability to do a lot of things that we can do, it's crazy how many people he influenced. He also had a life coaching. He was a licensed life coach, and he had some people that he mentored as well. And then he also had a master class where he, I think it was every Wednesday, he would do these courses on how to become a better video creator. And so Josh is one of those guys that would just turn on his phone, or I don't know what camera he used, and he'll record a video and just share life. And I think that there's a lot of people that are afraid to be on stage or turn on a camera or just speak publicly. Not Joshua. He was also a licensed minister, and I'm puffing him up because I really admire the fact of what he did, even up into his last breath. And I do believe that we're all called, right? That we're all called, and I believe Josh was chosen to do something in this generation, in this time frame. Of course, his beautiful wife, Christina, and his son, Daniel. We obviously wish them the best. And the people that I mentioned, so many names, so many people that have come and gone, so many history makers, so many people of influence. I mean, just the 40 names that I read, that's like 5 generations over. I'm lowballing it, but over 50,000 people have been affected or reached through these people. Probably more than that. Because I can account that there's 3 of them that would get at least 20,000 on their own. I would dare to say that my uncle Adrian influenced about 300,000 people. At least. At least. And that's a low number. So here's what I'll close it with, and I'll end it. This is going to be one of my short ones. As precious as life is, are you someone that thinks generationally? Or is all of this greatness that you've been achieving and collecting, whether you're a business owner, whether you're a life coach, or you're just a great employee, and you built a great retirement, and you have great vacations, you have great kids, or does it all end with you? Or is there going to be something crazy when you die? Is there going to be like just an outpouring of love and people just showing up at the funeral and really missing you? Did you steward this life well? There's a famous parable story of Jesus and, the talents, right? The 1, 3, and the 5. The guy with the 1 buries. The other 2 guys actually invested, did something with it. They invested it. At the end of this story, the guy with the 1 gets rebuked because, what did you do with that? Now I'll challenge myself and anybody that's going to listen or see this. To whom much is given, right? Much is required. And I believe that God's never going to give you more than you can handle. But while you are here, what kind of impact are you going to make? And this is what I'll say. Don't let it end with you. Right? Don't let it end with you. I think a lot of us will make some mistakes along the way. And I told my kids, this is what I'll land the plane with. I told my kids, look, we're going to make mistakes, and that's fine. I'm okay with making the mistakes. As long as we know why we're doing what we're doing. And we do it well. We do it with as much excellence as we can do. I had one more thing to share. I'm going to look, see if I can find it. Sometimes I write these notes and I don't know where I put them. And I wrote it down somewhere. I know what I was going to share. For anybody that wants to sow into Joshua Busby's family, it's on my Twitter, on my X profile, and I'll share it out again. They do have funeral services, I believe. Let me just look it up, and then I'll close it with that. Here it is. So Joshua Busby's funeral is going to be on March 26th of this month at First Baptist in Garland, Texas. They're going to live stream it as well. So the reason why I spent a little bit of time on Joshua, because he's one of the reasons why I was prompted to do this live today. It's not specific just for him, but he's one of the reasons why I decided to pull the trigger and do it. It's late and I'm tired. Gonna end this, finish the recording, put it up on Spotify tomorrow. But I want to say this: I'm blessed that you guys are listening, you're watching. Those of you that sub on Spotify, thank you. We're gonna be I just launched something on what we call Bandcamp. If you don't know what that is, don't worry. We'll make an announcement when it's ready. But I think it's cool. I like Bandcamp. If you don't know what that is, it's okay. If you do know what it is, you know what I'm talking about. So it should be fun. But here's what I'll say in closing. Whatever it is you're doing now, do it well. And if you're not doing what you're supposed to, go ahead and start. And I know that this is what I know. God wants the best for you. And if anybody's listening and you're like, well, you really mentioned a lot about God and Jesus today. Well, if that's something you want to get to know a little bit more about, just message me. And I'll definitely spend time with you about that. And I think that's it. My name is Brother Greg, a.k.a. the Real Gilo. This is one of my short ones. But I do thank you for being here. And I hope you guys have a blessed rest of your week or weekend, wherever you are watching or listening. And as I always say, thank you for your time. Thank you for your heart, super heart, your data, all the good stuff. But most importantly, thank you for your time above everything else. We will see you at the next one. Love you guys. God bless you guys. Hui ho, aloha, and mahalo. Yes, sir. Chihu.